just adjust this height. I haven't been taking growth hormone. It's genetic. I was lucky. Okay. Look, I just wanted to thank the organising committee for asking me to present today, and I also just wanted to acknowledge the lovely, warm, fuzzy feeling that I felt through this whole conference. I don't think I've ever been to a conference before where everyone just seems like family. And I guess there are a lot of families here, and you all have to be supportive of each other because this is such an area that we know so little about. But thank you, it's been wonderful. Having said all that, in my nearly 30 years working as a dietitian, I don't think I've found anything more challenging than trying to support both adults and their carers and families with trying to manage weight and Prader-Willi syndrome. So I really acknowledge the work and effort that you as parents and as carers and support workers and professionals are giving here. It's not easy. And we know a lot of this is just going to be obviously reinforcing what we've learnt over the last 2 days or what you already knew. But basically, we know that Prader-Willi syndrome is a very complex condition. We also know that unfortunately if we make too many wrong mistakes and don't allow a food secure environment, then obesity and comorbidities certainly raise their ugly heads. We have to have quite a multifaceted approach to manage Prader-Willi syndrome, particularly weight management in adults, because it's not just the individuals that we're dealing with. In a lot of cases, and certainly in my experience, there is a whole community of support network and carers that need to be trained and educated about Prader-Willi syndrome. I mean, it's a really unique condition that needs a lot of care and attention 24/7. A lot of people involved too, and of course Chinese whispers. You always get that situation where someone sort of says something and it gets carried down the line and interpreted as something completely different at the other end, at the coalface, and certainly that's been my experience working with particularly support workers in group homes where their interpretation of what I've said hasn't exactly transpired into that being provided. And there's also a lot of health professionals involved here. And here, there again, it's a fairly new area of health and science, and a lot of us have a lot to learn. So it's fabulous that we have organisations and conferences like this to help us pave the way. We also know that to add to the complexity of Prader-Willi syndrome, that there are a lot of weight-related problems, and I don't think that I've ever come across a condition, except perhaps for anorexia nervosa, where you've got so many body systems that are involved in this condition. And I might just draw your attention, because you all know these anyway, but the last condition, the infections due to trauma from skin picking, you might think, well, hang on, how does that sort of relate to weight or diet? Well, in fact, this is how I actually met one of my clients, Dan, who I'm just going to introduce you to now. So I'm going to take you back to 2006, bit of a time warp, I'm sorry, but this is 9 years ago, before I actually met Dan. He was a 21-year-old male living in Hobart with Prader-Willi syndrome, and he really valued his independence. And I put independence in inverted commas because we all know that unfortunately no one with Prader-Willi syndrome can live independently without any support at all. He had 2 younger healthy siblings at home, and unfortunately his behaviour was becoming less and less manageable, so much so that his parents had to look for alternative arrangements for him to live in a residential home. He moved into a group home with 7 others. It wasn't Prader-Willi specific, and his weight at this stage was 125 kilograms. Now, Dan didn't have the benefit of growth hormones, so because he had short stature, that gave him really put him at risk. I mean, he had a very high BMI, as you can see there, of around 52. Now, Dan's support at this stage consisted of carers 2 hours a day, including breakfast and the evening meal, and they had a communal dining area. He attended a day support centre Monday to Friday, where he took a pack to lunch, which again was supervised, and there were no food activities that he was to be involved in. The cupboards, fridges and bins at the group home were locked in most cases, and he certainly shouldn't have had any access unless he was supervised. There were quite a few social outings. As you can see, Dan was a bit of a social butterfly, so it included basketball, church groups, dinner with friends. So he was out 3 times a week, and he had a family meal roughly twice a week. GP had regular visits too. Dietitian visited the home fortnightly. I wasn't the dietitian at the time. And an endocrinologist he saw twice a year. But unfortunately at that time in Tasmania, we didn't actually have any Prader-Willi expert. We had people like Georgina fly across the strait to visit us and give us all some advice and support. So thank you for that, Georgina. And Dad was the finance manager. He managed the money side of things, happened to be an accountant, so that was handy. And Mum, it was interesting. Mum was doing all this work behind the scenes and was obviously very, very supportive. But Dan refused to have her involved, at least obviously. So we're all sort of tending to go behind the scenes a bit to learn from and communicate with Mum. Okay, so 1 year later. Unfortunately, what happens is this weight gain of nearly 20 kilograms in 1 year. Now, the dietitian at the time, my colleague, had taken maternity leave, so gave me a brief handover. And at the first scheduled appointment with Dan, he failed to attend. Now, I have to confess, I was actually a little bit relieved because I had heard that Dan was prone to tantrums and aggressive behaviour, and I didn't know a hell of a lot about Prader-Willi at that stage, at least not in adults. I'd done quite a bit of work with children in a very clinical environment. The Royal Children's Hospital was very nicely protected by specialists. But certainly in Hobart, Tasmania, we didn't have such a network of professionals, and this was pretty scary. Then a couple of weeks later, Dan did attend with his carer. And as you can imagine, Dan was pretty stressed by the situation. I was pretty stressed by the situation, although I was trying to keep a very low, calm voice throughout our initial meeting. But what I did learn during that session, in between all his repetitive questions, was the fact that he had very limited supervision, that access to food was plentiful, particularly all those social outings, and unfortunately there was a lot of inconsistencies in terms of very high staff turnover and staff not following the plan that the previous dietitian had set up, and inconsistent rules. So in other words, a pretty stressful, almost toxic environment for someone in this situation. Okay, so we hit crisis point. In fact, 10 days after that appointment, Dan was admitted to hospital. He had cellulitis, which had become infected, and I suspect that some of that nearly 20 kilogram weight gain was due to edematous fluid collection in his legs. But anyway, it certainly raised a number of issues because he ended up being in hospital for 2 months. Now, hospital, you'd think, would be a really safe environment. Wow. Well, maybe if it's a Prader-Willi Syndrome specific unit, but we don't have that at the Royal Hobart Hospital. So there were cleaners feeling sorry for Dan and giving him extra snacks, and the catering ladies were always really obliging. And yeah, he put on about 5 kilograms during his 2-month visit. And remember that he would have lost some fluid from his edematous legs at that stage too, after his cellulitis inflammation had settled. So it was a pretty ghastly situation, but out of something bad can come something good. So this crisis point actually led to a turning point. And so we went into crisis management, where basically we met with the care coordinator of the group home, obviously the parents, and I was involved. The GP was involved in a more peripheral way, but what basically came of this meeting was there was new units being built which were supervised, and it meant that Dan could have his own unit. He didn't have to share in the communal dining room, which was a godsend. This unit had his own bedroom, he had his own bathroom, his kitchen, living and dining room, and he also had the option to socialise in a shared common room if he chose. And was certainly encouraged. The other thing that was it was quite a good idea was the appointment of a legal guardian. Now, this was someone who was independent, who Dan learnt to trust and respect, and to give not only legal advice, but also, more importantly, to encourage Dan to keep his commitments to appointments and other important situations. There were more supervised hours, yippee, 4 hours a day. Still many hours that weren't supervised, obviously, but certainly we needed a tighter meal plan and an exercise plan. Okay, now when it comes to weight loss, it is about the law of thermodynamics, but it's much more than that, and particularly in adults with Prader-Willi syndrome. And if any of you have tried to lose weight yourself, you know how difficult it is without Prader-Willi syndrome. So you know, this takes a lot of support. Okay, so we know that for a start with adults, they're trying to gain more independence and autonomy. So you've got to try and sort of factor that in. There's a lot of negotiation. There's increased access to food in most cases, and sometimes money, which you need to obviously put the reins on. We know that people with Prader-Willi syndrome have much lower energy requirements than a normal, healthy, matched individual. The figures vary depending on which research. I mean, it can vary from 50 up to 75%, but everyone's an individual when it comes to Prader-Willi syndrome, so you've just got to individualise it according to the person that you're trying to support. Obviously there's that cognitive impairment, and that can vary considerably too, but it means usually difficulty processing information, limited food preparation skills, which you have to take into account. There's less supervision in group homes. There's lots of temptations with the social gatherings and stuff, which needed obviously to be curbed, not eliminated, but certainly reduced. And unfortunately there can be, because of staff changes, that inconsistency that needs to be addressed. And the behavioural issues that go along with those stressful situations and that lack of food security. So diet plan, I'm just going to whiz through this because I'm sure most of you can count calories better than I can, especially if you've got a child with or an adult with Prader-Willi syndrome. But there is a real need to get it right in terms of making sure that the nutrient-dense core food groups are there to make sure that their diet's not only low calorie or low kilojoule, but also it contains the vitamins and minerals they need. Now, often they will require supplementation, often with calcium and with vitamin D, and particularly everyone in Tassie basically needs vitamin D supplementation, probably Melbourne as well. But there's also the issue of fibre, getting enough fibre too. Constipation, as we've learned, is a major complicating factor. So just getting that checked out by a qualified dietitian or food boss or food police, whatever you like to call us, we don't care as long as we can actually work together as a consistent team. Things like low GI, high protein doesn't make any difference, to be honest. I mean, certainly you can implement those strategies, but for someone with Prader-Willi syndrome, they don't actually help with satiety like they would in a normal, healthy individual. However, they are nutrient-dense foods generally, so it's a smart thing to probably include. Okay, now I'm going to just head to food treats. This was used for calorie bargaining, negotiating, if you like. I've got the sign saying end, but I've got a few more slides. Thanks, Georgina. So things like diet jellies, diet cokes, these aren't things that we normally like to have included in a special or a healthy diet rather, but they can be damn useful in social situations and make the person with Prader-Willi syndrome feel special. So they can be useful. Meal plan, you can see this on the DVD that we're recording here, but just wanted to point out a few things. We did negotiate, did respect the fact that Dan wanted to have input into this, and fair enough, he's got to live with this. There are a few things like 2-minute noodles that he insisted on having. We compromised and said, well, they've got to be 97% fat-free, and he was okay with that. And so basically, this is his meal plan. It includes a takeaway once a week, and it includes a social function at the group home, which is supervised, a barbecue. But he feels quite happy with that. It comes in under 1,200 calories. There's a bit of leeway there for social functions, so that if he does actually eat a bit more than this, then that's actually included in the meal plan, or incorporated in the meal plan anyway. One of the things that we did was extend the meals with lots of low-calorie vegetables and salad. So his lunch is quite a large bowl of salad. Although we did at one point allow him to use salad dressing, low dual salad dressing or low energy salad dressing from the bottle. That was pretty unsuccessful because, as any of you know who've worked with people with Prader-Willi syndrome, they love condiments. The more flavour the better, the more salt, etc. We had to remove the salt shaker, and we had to end up getting salad dressing portions, as in 12 meal portions rather than the whole bottle. They weren't low dual, but we figured with the extra oil in it, he's going to get some extra essential fatty acids anyway, so it's probably a good thing. And the recipe selection Dan chose the recipes, they were from Mum, but obviously on the left-hand side you can see the original version from Mum, which was a bit too open and free for someone with Prader-Willi syndrome, and I had to really just portion control it, okay? So Janice talked about no hope. I'd rather say portion control. Sounds much more positive. And you'll notice the addition of, again, flavour and the chilli powder there. Supermarket safari, just quickly, all of us probably feel pretty anxious when we walk into a supermarket. This slide here just shows the part of the cereal section, and I counted up over 170 different cereals the other day in my supermarket. So, someone with sensory overload problems is going to be just overwhelmed. So just a few tips on shopping. Be prepared, obviously. Make a list and stick with it, and that's really important when you're shopping with someone with Prader-Willi syndrome, because you can often get distracted. There can often be problems like, I went shopping with Dave one day, there were no bananas. Can you believe it? The only day I went shopping with him is no bananas, because there's a cyclone in Queensland, so there's no bananas available. And after convincing Dave, after many questions about cyclones that went on for a millennium, when I tried to explain why there were no bananas, I eventually said, look, we've got a list here, we've got to stick with it, we've got other fruit we can choose instead, so what are you going to choose? So we ended up getting around it, but it took a long time, lots of patience, and a low, calm voice. It was a long shop. And yeah, having contingency plans for situations like that are really important, obviously, to reduce the stress level. The last thing I wanted to do was deal with tantrums in the supermarket. I've often wondered about the virtues of online shopping for people with Prader-Willi syndrome. Dan's not agreeable to this, and this slide might explain why. But certainly, again, it would mean a lot of supervision anyway, and it would depend on the cognitive ability of the actual individual you're caring for. Now, put you in Doctor Who's TARDIS and take you forward 8 years later, and this is basically the outcome. You can see that the peak at the top is where we were in the hospital admission, and basically Dan, over the last 8 years, has succeeded in a little rocky fashion, but to lose almost 50% of his original body weight. So it's wonderful to see that achievement, and he feels so much better for it. I'm not going to actually go through all these ingredients for successful weight management because you know them already. Janice cut my lunch this morning, so they say, and that's a dietetic term, by the way. And but basically, lots of things there that are really important: consistency, having a plan, having goals, making sure that the staff are all well trained and all know about Prader-Willi syndrome issues, having experts. That was really important in Dan's case, recognising people as experts. I'm the diet expert. We've now got a physician in Hobart who is the Prader-Willi syndrome expert, which is fabulous. And Dan has a lot of respect for these experts. And it also helps pave a lot of problems when you've got issues that, especially in group homes, and there's lots of staff and you get team splitting. Dan has his favourites that he listens to and follows advice for, and then he has his less favourite people who he refuses to do anything for. And certainly when it comes to diet, it was really important to have me as an expert so I could, basically come in and help sort things out. Prader-Willi syndrome, trying to help people as adults with this condition, requires a lifelong, effective and consistent team effort. And I use this analogy or this metaphor of climbing a mountain because I thought it would be nice for our New Zealand delegates, particularly this last slide. It's a pretty extraordinary achievement to actually help provide this lifelong support and certainly to succeed with weight loss, as we've seen in this situation, and I know of many others that I've talked to, parents and support workers through this conference. But it's worth it. So hang in there.